Good afternoon everybody, Smart Baber here from Sony. And we're going to be with you in just over 3 minutes time, myself and Glyn Dewis, professional photographer, talking about capturing timeless portraits using people skills and technology. So just over 3 minutes, grab yourself a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, and we'll be with you very, very soon. Looking forward to seeing you all. Good afternoon everybody, it's Mark Baber here from Sony, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm the technical marketing manager for our photo channel here in the UK and Ireland, and we are going live today, Friday the 20th of November. It's just gone 3 o'clock and we're on the Campkins cameras Cambridge Photography Week Facebook live channel, and we're going to be talking to Glyn Dewis, professional photographer, Sony Alpha creator as well, on portraits, classic portraits, and people skills and technology, and how they go hand in hand when putting amazing photography together. I think we all can relate to that as well when we're trying to do our shots of whether family, friends, portraits of dogs, of cats and things like that. It's how we apply ourselves to that and what we get out of it the best when we're looking at engaging with people behind and in front of the camera. So stay with us as well right to the end, because we've got some exclusive offers. So if you didn't see our little teaser yesterday, then there are some incredible offers. But importantly as well, we're going to finish on a very poignant message around what we're talking about today with Glyn. So I'm going to bring Glyn into the conversation in a second, but let's have a look closely at what we're going to talk about, what Glyn's going to give us an insight to today, and just have a look at some of his work and how it kind of all comes together. So we'll just run this video and then we'll bring Glyn into the studio.
Let's take a moment now to consider the significance of this next story. Two veteran glider pilots, not far off their 100th birthdays, and the only surviving members of their squadron, were reunited yesterday. 98-year-old Denzel Cooper from Sutton Coldfield and 97-year-old Jim Hooper from Brighton both flew missions during D-Day and Arnhem. Lindsay Doyle was there for the big reunion.
Denzel.
Jimmy.
Good to see you.
And you?
Yeah, I'm fine,
You're looking very well.
Eyewitnesses to history, both men took part in D-Day and the Battle of Arnhem, carrying troops in the wooden planes without engines, landing in the middle of enemy territory. The glider regiment was the smallest in the British Army.
We have been trained to do a job, and that is precisely what we do. And I don't know about Denzel. I did it with a degree of apprehension, but certainly not fear.
What about you? Were you afraid?
Never entered my head.
Their portraits have now been taken by Lichfield-born photographer Glyn Dewis as part of his 3945 project to try and photograph all surviving World War II veterans.
As far as I saw it, whenever they did have pictures, it was always pictures that were taken when they were at events. So I wanted them to have a portrait that was something that looked timeless and that, you know, could be passed on to them, could be passed on to their families for generations to come.
As veterans were honoured and presentations made at the Soldiers of Oxfordshire Museum, Hooper and Cooper were inseparable. The purpose of the exhibition is to honour and remember our surviving veterans.
The moment I get to know about another veteran, I literally will plan and go and do that photograph straight away, because thankfully, touch wood, I've not had it where I've been given a name and they've passed in the interim where I've not been to photograph them. But you're right, every single day on some of the groups that I belong to on social media, you see a post every day, another man down, RIP, another man down, RIP, which is why there is an absolute urgency to get out there and do this. It really is.
The idea is to educate younger generations about the Second World War. The exhibition runs until early next year.
Incredible piece of work. And let's bring in Glyn Dewis and say, hello Glyn, how are you?
Hello Mark, how are you, mate?
Yeah, very good, thanks. A bit wet outside, but I'm not sure what it's like with you at the moment. But thanks for obviously sharing that. It just hopefully gives the audience an insight of where this has all come from, and as well as being obviously a photographer, a professional photographer using Sony, quite a remarkable project that you've put together, and is obviously still ongoing. I mean, where for the viewers and the people that are watching, where did the idea kind of come from? How did it start?
It kind of happened by accident, to be honest with you, Mark. I've always had an interest in history, particularly that time in history, World War II, and the events surrounding that. But I kind of, first of all, started out just photographing reenactors, because there was a certain style that I wanted to create in my portraits, but I didn't want to photograph models as such. I've never been somebody who photographs models. I've always wanted to photograph real people, characters, if you like. So I started to sort of create a look which I kind of copied off photographers whose work I absolutely love. In fact, I'll show you a picture now. Let me just show you this picture here. This is where I got the original idea for the kind of look I wanted for these particular portraits. If I just kind of show you this one here. In fact, not that one. Let's have a look here. Inspiration. There we go. This here is two pictures. There's one by Annie Leibovitz, and you got Yusuf Karsh. And those pictures were the ones that completely inspired me for the look that I wanted to go for this particular work. But I was photographing these reenactors, and then all of a sudden I just got the idea that I thought, I really know what I want to do with my photography. I want to put it to a good use as opposed to just something for fun. And I kind of wanted to photograph World War II veterans, and it kind of went from there. I didn't know any veterans, but I found a Facebook group who had kindly allowed me to join, and they were a Normandy veterans group, and it kind of went from there. And it's kind of grown to more than I ever thought it would, and I think that's probably because I didn't intend it to. Do you know what I mean? It was done for the right reasons, because I wanted to give them the portraits. Yeah, and it's just grown.
And how many veterans have you managed to photograph so far? I don't think I've ever asked you that, actually.
Do you know what? I actually count them up. I think we're touching nearly 100 now, and that
wow.
For me is fantastic to be able to photograph that many, but also to know that there are that many at least who are still with us, and there are many more. Do you know, many more. So obviously the lockdown has put a bit of a break on things, but as you said, the project is still ongoing.
For those of you that are watching, if you do have any questions as well for Glyn, this is a great opportunity to talk to a photographer in the industry working on a project like this, which is quite, especially on the so recently Remembrance Day is just, obviously still in the hearts and minds of a lot of people, and has just passed recently as well. And I know there's a lot of commemorative aspects of different elements going on this year as well, despite the pandemic. So it's fantastic to see that still going ahead. So if you do have questions, please ask. And if you've got any tech questions, well, I think for this type of webinar, the amount of insight to Glyn's work, it kind of puts the kit to the side. But obviously the kit is important. So if you do have any kit questions, then please let us know. The platform we're using, I do get questions come up on the screen, so I will bring your questions up. I've just had Philip from Wigan. He said hi and thank you. Owen is also in the wings supporting us, the owner of Campkins. He's going to be with his team answering questions as well. So please take the time to ask anything you would like around Glyn's work, and obviously kit as well. Talking about kit, so you use Sony. I don't think you use Sony all the time. What's your journey when it comes to kit? What's in the kit bag at the moment?
Well, yeah, to sort of preface that, I started out when I first started as a photographer using Nikon. Then I moved to Canon, and I really enjoyed using Canon. Still loved it. However, I think it's worth saying the reason why I moved to Sony was because my particular style of retouching, because I kind of started out as a retoucher. When I was working on some images a few years ago, I just started to get a little bit of breaking down the shadows. That's just what I experienced. And it just so happened a friend of mine was a Sony shooter. He sent me a file to have a bit of a play with. And to be honest with you, I completely battered it, and it still held up. So that's the only reason I shifted over. And for the record, all the kit I have has been paid for out of my own pocket. I'm using it because it's fit for purpose. It does what I want it to do, and that's all we can ask for as photographers, isn't it? But the reason I originally started using it has kind of fallen by the wayside, because there's many more reasons, and I guess we'll talk about those in a short while as to why I'm just really happy with the kit. Do you know what I mean? I don't really give it much thought, if I'm honest, Mark. It does what I want it to do, so I can do what I want to do. Do you know what I mean? So shall I show you some of the images and I actually go through the kit I've got as well? Was that worth doing?
Go for it. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, here's just examples of some of the images. This is a very dear friend of mine, Alan Scott, who was our only living Spitfire pilot. Wonderful, wonderful man. And I'll just show you an example of them. Hopefully what folks can see is that there is there's a consistency across the images, which is really, really important when it comes to doing a project. But the actual kit I'm using, the current kit I've got, I'm using a Sony A7R4, which I'm really, really happy with. And I do get asked what lenses I'm tending to use. And I'm actually a really big fan of prime lenses. I use a 55mm prime lens, the one you can see on the left there. That's when I'm doing the seated or the standing shots. And then you will have seen just maybe one or two really close-up headshots. Then I use the 85mm G Master, which is just insane for, really, really sharp, and it allows me to photograph at an incredibly shallow depth of field, and to be able to really control that, because that can be quite challenging. And we'll talk about how I do that actually, if you want as well. Lighting, keeping it really simple. We'll talk about that. I use an Westcott FJ400. I guess the reason I use this one as well is I love it. It works just like the camera does. Does what I want it to do, but also I like to have a wireless setup. It's really important for me, especially photographing veterans, elderly veterans with mobility issues. That's just something to really consider. I use an L bracket as well, so that I can have the camera on portrait or landscape without having to up and down on the tripod, so the axis of the lens stays the same. And I'm always always shooting tethered. That is like a must-do thing. Must shoot tethered.
Talking about lighting, Philip that said hi from Wigan has got our first question. So I'm just going to bring that right up now. Here he comes. Here we go. Okay, so Philip says, if you use on-camera flash, what's the best setup technique that does not give a harsh light?
Well, if you're having to use on-camera flash, is that what you're saying there? On-camera flash.
Yeah.
Do you know one thing that I used to do, Philip, which works really, really well, especially if you're in a room that's maybe got the walls quite close to you, confined space, or you're in a studio where you can go to the side of the wall. Just turn that head, because most on-camera flashes have a head that you can actually rotate. So if you kind of angle it to the side and you've got like a white wall, get that light to bounce on that white wall. It will fill that wall, and that will become your softbox and bounce back on your subject. Failing that, if you've got a friend who's with you and they've got a white shirt on, like I remember I did this on stage once. I needed another light bringing in. So I got somebody on stage who had a white T-shirt on, and they stood to the side of my subject and had their white shirt, the back of it, facing the subject. And I bounced the light off their shirt, and then that lit them. So it's just a case of being a bit kind of technical with it. The very least you want to do is to diffuse it, somehow diffuse it by having that small light there made bigger. It's very difficult to do that if it's on the camera. So I'd suggest the only thing you can do really is turn it and bounce it off something so it comes onto them.
Brilliant. And there's more and more tips as well on your website, and we'll come on to that for those of you that want to see more of Glyn's work and find out more about his 3945 projects as well. Then we've got the links and the website to share with you a bit later. But please keep your questions coming through. The more questions we've got, the longer the webinar will go on, which is great. So a lot of engagement with these webinars is really important, that we listen and let you guys in, whoever and wherever you are across the UK and Ireland and beyond. I think with the way that we are doing these types of webinars now to engage with customers, to engage with the audience, it's now just not local. We're talking to a lot of people across the globe. And of course, when this finishes, the recording will be on the Facebook Live channel as well for Campkins Cameras Cambridge Photography Week. So you can watch this again at your own leisure and fast forward to the best bits, or take me out and go straight to Glyn, or whatever you want to do. Okay, so we'll come back to more questions in a second, but Glyn, you've done your research. You've obviously been invited to Veterans House, or you've gone to a venue to take the photograph. What's the approach? How do you go about it? I think we go about things in different ways, but how do you to get those incredible shots?
Well, first and foremost is that I would say that I have never had too much space when it comes to photographing a veteran. It's always been at their home. So because I'm photographing a stranger, in effect, it's the first time I've met them, it's a stranger, I will always make sure there is a friend or family member there. That is really important for reasons really we shouldn't have to think about, but security, safety and all that kind of stuff anyway, and accusations and what have you. But it also, probably more importantly, makes them feel more comfortable. So, Mark, if you were a veteran and I was coming to see you, I would make sure there was somebody there that you knew. And then when I came in, I would leave all my kit in the car. All my kit would be in the car. So I would then come to the door, you'd answer the door. And because you're not a model, and maybe you're actually feeling a bit anxious being photographed, the fact that I'm not at the door laden down with kit is going to do some good, because you're not going to be inundated by thinking, oh, my Lord, I'm going to be photographed. And then we'll go in. We'll have a cup of tea or coffee. Even if I don't want one, I will have one, because that then is an excuse for us to sit and talk. And we could talk for half an hour, 40 minutes or whatever about anything and everything. But the purpose of that is for me and you to get to know each other so that you start to relax. And then when I feel that we're relaxed, I'll then go, Mark, tell you what, let's get that picture done. Because honestly, Mark, the actual photo shoot itself is just a small part of my visit. It really is. The longest part is the talking, then the setting up, but the photo shoot is hardly anything. Let me show you. In fact, let me just show these pictures here. I've got some examples of some of the setups, Mark, here. If I dive over to this one here, this is a perfect example of one of the setups. So you can see I don't need a big footprint to be able to do this. It's really simple. Like I said, I use one light to try to recreate that classic, timeless kind of look of the pictures that I showed earlier on, Yusuf Karsh, Annie Leibovitz. So you've got your one light, you've got your background behind, and then you've got me with the camera, which is always on a tripod. And I'd love to be able to talk about the reason for that in a moment. But real small setup. And you can see on this next one here, This is when I photographed a guy called Laurie Whedon, who sadly passed in the last few days. Wonderful man, glider pilot regiment, he Battle of Arnhem. He was just incredible, this guy. But to photograph him, I had to do it in the galley of his kitchen. Do you know what I mean? In the actual galley of his kitchen. Now, the reason that I kind of stress that is because one of the things I did when I was first started out on this project was to decide on a lighting setup. Because whereas before, when I was doing all my photography, I was kind of stressing out about getting a style. So every time I had a photo shoot, I would think I had to change something to do something different each time. But what I very quickly learned was it's not the case of having to change the technicals, it's the content that changes. So by keeping the lighting setup the same, that allows you then to become very comfortable with it, to be able to then adapt to your surroundings. So like in Laurie's case here, ordinarily I would use the large octa, but because there wasn't the space for it, I used a smaller octabox. But we know as photographers, a small light source in close gives the same softness of light as a large light source further back. So that's kind of, you know, the simple setup there. But you can kind of see that it, you know, it doesn't have to take up a lot of space. It really, really doesn't. You know, you don't need the studio setups. You don't need all the latest and greatest of backgrounds and stuff. You can adapt to your surroundings. And I kind of like that because it means for me, that's real photography as opposed to, and I hope I don't offend anybody's saying that. Photography is photography. But for me, if I'm talking about me here, I want to photograph real people. And real people means in real environments, as far as I'm concerned.
The thing I take from that is obviously the first impressions, seeing you as a normal, you know, just a normal person. I think I think I use the terminology like meet as people first, rather than client photographer. But from that point of view, you're breaking down any barriers if there is that kind of
totally,
kind of uncertainty.
Mark,
as well as
the conversation. I'm sorry for butting over you, mate, but while it's in my head,
please.
the conversation side of things. There's so much I've learned over the last few years, and it just seems that so much of it that has improved my photography isn't photography. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of I've learned to talk more than I take pictures, and this isn't just to help to relax people, which it clearly does because they get more comfortable with you, and when you start to have a bit of a laugh and a bit of a rapport going. But more than anything, what this does is allow you to kind of get to understand the person that you're photographing. And I know I've given you like a little video to play in a moment. This for me is one of the perfect examples as to why it is so important to not just photograph your people straight away. Don't treat every photo shoot as another photo shoot, especially, you know, when it's a portrait. Get to know them because it's amazing. Can you just do us a favor, Mark? Can you play the John Sleep video? And I want to, before you play, I just want to kind of say for those watching, if you'd gone to visit this guy and you're sat down there and you're talking to him before you have your photo shoot, look at how he is and how he's talking and his emotion. Would you treat this as every other photo shoot that you've done, or would you maybe think about approaching it differently? And I'll tell you what I did afterwards.
Well, the first aid race, and of course it was so crowded, they put me in with the Germans. Then during the night, the MO come in and said, "You're keeping everybody awake with your swearing and ordering people about, you know," because I was in charge of 8 men. And he said, "We're sending you to Brussels tomorrow morning, or train." So I arrived in Brussels, and the same thing happened there. During the next morning, they said, "We're shipping you out to England. You kept everybody awake." And then I arrived in Wales, Whitchurch, near Wales there, big hospital. And the same thing happened there. I was put into the main ward, and during the night they'd moved me out into a small room. Of course, I said, "What the hell am I doing here?" I said, "Well, you've been ordering people about and swearing all night."
Were you aware that you were doing that? You weren't?
Oh no, it still happens now. Yeah, the wife used to say to me, "You've been in the army again."
Glyn, I think, yeah, I I think you know what we've just covered just sums that up, because if you've got a gung ho approach, or you're just in and out, need to get the photograph, and I know in certain circumstances, especially where work over the last good few months has been reduced, certainly from a photography point of view, you're not potentially listening to the person in front of you, accommodating their emotions as well, but also you're never going to get that image that the family and the person is maybe looking to get, and from your brief and your research, you're going to be far off from that. Quite a important message there.
That guy there, that just wonderful man, John Sleep, who's ex-parachute regiment. He's 99 years of age. He's just an incredible man. He really is. And as I'm guessing everybody who's watching can see, as I know we've spoken about this one, Mark, that he is so, you can just see he's so emotional. He wears his heart on his sleeve. He really does. But when I'm kind of just talking about how I photographed John and the importance of talking, because when you get something like that in front of you, you can't just go in there, regardless of what it is that you want to come away with from this photo shoot. I must have a seated shot, a headshot, and what have you. You've got to adapt to the person you're with. You've got to do what's right for them. And for John, it was okay. Let me just show. Actually, I'll show his picture. Then let me just explain how I did it. But here's the portrait that I ended up taking of John. And hopefully you can see that he doesn't look like somebody who's close to tears. He doesn't look like that at all. The reason, the way I photographed John, and this is where the technology goes hand in hand with certainly how I'm working and how it's really helped me, is because I had thoughts when John was talking to me that if I used a flash, I don't really know how that's going to react to him, how it's going to make him react, rather, because he's clearly suffering with post-traumatic stress. At the age of 99, he still has it. So I don't want to go there and cause him any any sort of emotional kind of breakdown or anything like that, So I always have with me, not just a flash, but in the car, I also have a constant video light. So instead I chose to use that as well. So I bring that in, I set it up in exactly the same way. The constant light goes into the softbox. I get John to sit down. And the great thing is with that is what you see is what you get. I can see where the light's going to go. I get John to sit down. I put my camera on the tripod. But the thing is with my camera, this is where the technology, which you maybe dismiss at first and you don't think really it's that important, or I don't really do that kind of work to sort of justify needing it. But this is where this is when you kind of think, I'm so glad I've got that, because with John, I then turned on face tracking so that the camera is now tracking John, because the last thing I want to do, having built a rapport with him, is to hide behind the camera, because then he's going to start to feel anxious about being photographed and I'm not going to get the real him. And actually, this is how I photograph everybody. But I can then put the camera into silent shutter, face tracking, and I plug in a cable release. So he's not going to see my finger doing this. He's not going to hear a click, and he's not going to see a flash. So as far as he's concerned, me and him are just talking, and I haven't started taking pictures yet. And I just said to John, tell me about being a para, John. Tell me about what your training was like. And he's going into it. And while he's doing that, I'm doing this, and he doesn't see it. I'm pressing the shutter through the cable. The camera's tracking his face. So wherever he's moving, he's quite a sort of demonstrative kind of man like this, but the camera's locked on. At the end of it, he stops talking, and I get my laptop and show him. I say, John, you nailed it. I'm so happy with these. And he's like, I didn't know you were doing that. He says, you crafty devil. Ways and means, John, ways and means. And you just have to kind of adapt, But
so things like,
again, the talking is so important, and the technology hand in hand, it just works,
With the technology, then, the first thing I think of just putting my kind of technical marketing hat on is silent shooting. So obviously, with older traditional DSLRs, you don't have that. That's a feature of mirrorless from pretty much day one, with a lot of manufacturers, obviously including ourselves. So silent shooting. I mean, obviously having a smaller, lighter weight camera, that's obviously not going to be intrusive as well. But just picking up there as well, it's the talking, the showing of the image in the moment. Obviously, back of the camera, you don't have a monitor or anything like that to show. What's the reaction like when they get the print? The veterans have got the print. I can only imagine it's you hopefully they like it.
That's what it's all about. It's all about how they feel. And I've given you a video actually to play. Just play that in a moment, David Edwards, because that video there just kind of, to me, I've watched it so many times, and it epitomizes that's why I'm a photographer, to get that reaction. I don't go and spend you know, decent amount of money on kit, loads of time learning the trade, to then have somebody look at a picture that I've taken on an iPad and flick past and go, that's nice, that's nice, that's nice. You want a reaction. And the reaction of David Edwards, because this is what I do. I always go back, as you know, with the veterans, I say they're going to get a print, and they get a print. And it's not just a print, it's a mounted print on fine art paper, and I deliver it personally to them. Can you just play that video now, Mark,
yes,
of David Edwards when he gets the print? Because this, for me, it doesn't get any better than this, the reaction. So let me play. This is David Edwards, World War II veteran David Edwards, and his wife Di when I delivered their portrait. Nobody's seen it yet, apart from me. All right, and do you want to have a look at it then? Turn it over.
Oh my gosh! Oh boy, that's a portrait. That is brilliant. Lovely, isn't it? You've even got that cheeky, silly look about it.
It's like a painting.
It's lovely. Oh, just look at that. I can't get over it. Even your ties at an angle. Look at it.
My nicest photograph I've ever had taken.
He's in tears now.
Oh, bless.
Yeah, look at that. It was worth all the work, wasn't it?
It was worth the second visit.
It was worth the second visit, definitely.
I could see
but you've got his hands as well, is so good.
I used to do a lot of painting. And very often, it's more, you know better than me, it's more important what you leave out than what you put in, isn't it?
That's it.
It's gorgeous.
But look at the arms and the chairs
and
coming through there.
Fades away there, look.
It's lovely.
And there, and your point of interest comes on there.
Point of interest is your face.
Lovely, yeah.
Bless him. You know, it's real. I'm so pleased we've been able to play that today, because 3 days ago we lost David, and he's such a wonderful. I think anybody who's watching that, you just know what a lovely man, what a lovely couple of people, and to lose him is just so sad. But it shows how damn important it is to take portraits, not just veterans' portraits, but anybody's portrait, because that is such a precious thing for people to have in years to come, to spark memories of somebody. It's so important. It's way more than the kind of stuff that we get so involved about, you know, pixels and stuff like that. Of course, that's important, I know, but take the pictures. Do you know what I mean? Just take the pictures. But also seeing that video there, Mark, it just makes me realise how, or reminds me rather, how much more of a project this is than just photography. It's about relationships. It's about making friends, and it's way more than photography. But I think it can only become that when you become comfortable with your photography.
You're absolutely right, and I think for me, you know, if you came to my house and you saw pictures in my house, my photographs are mainly of documenting my life and my kids, and you know, the people that are with us and are not with us anymore. And for my 2 young kids, it's really important photography that they identify the people that they love around them, whether they're here or not. And of course, every image has a story, and I know that's probably a bit of a cliche, but you know, Di, David's wife, will look at that portrait and their family in a way that they've, you know, probably never looked at a photograph in the same way again. And you know, looking at the style and the approach that you've had to these type of portraits, there's no wonder that you get a reaction like that David had. We do have another question, Glyn. We've got a question from Benjamin Alanis, so I'm going to just bring up his comment in a second. Here we go. So Benjamin says, what would you say is the best way to expose for skin tones? So he's avoiding skin tones looking red. He's not sure blemishes is the correct term to overpower the shot. So probably the question there would be more, what's the best way to expose for skin tones?
Do you know what? I tend to find that the camera now just does a lot of the work for me with stuff like that. My work is engaging with the person, and the camera does a lot of the exposure for me, because I'm in a consistent environment when I'm photographing these people in their houses. I tend to use aperture priority. You know, the camera can calculate it and give me a really good lighting. It never used to be that good years ago when we used things like aperture priority. Do you know what I mean? But now I love it. It does do that for me. But when it comes to, you know, the colours and blemishes and stuff like that, I would suggest that, and I hope this answers the question correctly, whatever mode you photograph in, always use a grey card, because then when it comes to doing the post-production, you can then use that grey card to then get the correct color balance for your picture. And then just if a blemish is too obvious, it's post-production that's going to bring it down. Do you know what I mean? You're not going to light in a way that's really not going to reveal blemishes. If you're photographing real people and that's a blemish, that's a blemish. That's them. If it's a permanent one, leave it there. If it's a non-permanent mark, you could consider removing it, but always ask first.
Brilliant. So we've lost your picture a bit. I don't know if you saw, but you're coming back. You're coming back. So I don't know if yeah, turn everything off in the background, which is great. So please stay with us again. It's not just about the offers and things like that. We will be playing something at the end, which I think will sum up, everything that we've talked about today. And please keep your questions coming. I do have another question, actually, Glyn. This is from Alec Davis. So thank you, Alec. We'll just bring Alec's question up. Here we go. Great photos. Did you have to do much post-processing? If so, what did you do to enhance them?
That's a really good question, Alex. So thanks for asking that. If you'd have asked me that question maybe 2 years ago, I would have said, yeah, I spent about an hour and a half on that picture and it had about 80 layers. But this series of images here, I've got the retouching down because it's a consistent look. I could probably get them done in about 5 or 6 minutes. And the vast majority of the time, and it's only literally a couple of minutes, is the color grading. To give them that consistency of look throughout the whole picture. So the color grading, I use lookup tables in Photoshop to do a certain kind of look for them. And I guess the only other thing that I do that's kind of maybe a little bit different is I do different levels of contrast. So that on their faces, I would add a contrast to their whole face, and then I'll duplicate that layer, add more contrast, but then limit that contrast only to the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. That sounds a bit weird, but when you do that and you see it on screen and printed, it makes it 3D almost. At the exhibition, when they had the prints hanging there, the detail in them was insane. But people said they felt like they were coming forward of the screen. And that's a combination of the detail that I'm capturing, but also the post-production. So, yeah, not much involved in it, mainly those two things.
And again, we'll bring your website up later as well, so that people can see. Obviously, I think you've got loads of tutorials and videos and stuff, which I think will all benefit everyone's photography, of what camera brand you use. So it's available to all. I've just brought something up. Philip from Wigan said, "Brilliant. We all want reactions to our portraits like that." I think I totally agree.
Yeah.
And Brian Gilmore is just literally, I was just about to go and ask you a question, but keep these coming because these are great. So thank you for that, Philip. Thank you for that, Alec. Let's just now bring up Brian Gilmore. So quite a long one. So Brian, as an ex-serviceman, I found the videos of the World War II soldiers quite emotional. I like the way you described how you approached the shoot, and it played off when you show the results. So thank you so much, Brian.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brian. That means a lot for you being a veteran as well, to come and say that. That says a lot. This is, I would say, the most important thing I think I've ever done, not just in my photography life, but in my life. It really has, and it's amazing how photography can have an impact on your life. Do you know what I mean? I think we all go through stages of when we start out photography, and we use words like passion and stuff like that. It just seems like the words that we have to use. Do you know what I mean? But when you kind of take the focus off yourself and you do a project for the right reasons, things just happen. I mean, I touched briefly on style earlier on, Mark, and the fact that there are so many people out there wanting to do photography and good on them for wanting to do it. You can only kind of grow. I think you can only grow when you go and do projects, because you get known for the project rather than you having to constantly tell people what you do. You get known for that, and people know what you can do from that project. So that's one of the biggest tips I'd ever give anybody. If you want to get yourself out there, get a project.
We've looked at the approach, you've looked at the research, you've looked at the emotion, the engagement, the talking. That's I think we can see from that it's very rewarding, it's very powerful what you do. What happens when it goes wrong, or what are the challenges? Is that a link with technology, or can you give us any examples of what it's like? How hard is it? And what are the pitfalls, I suppose?
You kind of have to be a bit of a duck on the water. Do you know what I mean? Whereas you kind of get to a situation, and in outside you're going, oh, that's fine, we can sort this out. Underneath you're thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? But thankfully, again, because I've approached this project with knowing the style that I want to do, you adapt to your environment. It allows you to adapt. Perfect example, Mark, is this one here. If I show his portrait first of all, this guy here, this is the most incredible man called Tom Schaefer.
Wow.
What a wonderful man. He is every bit the character he looks he is. Do you know what I mean? He's wonderful. But I've got to say, his was probably one of the hardest photo shoots I've ever had. This is where I photographed Tom in his house in North London. I mean, a lovely little house, got loads of little memorabilia, military memorabilia about, but we had hardly any space. And the background I used takes up no space, but we had hardly any space. So much so that the 55mm lens I was using, I could only just get it so that it was on top of the camera. Sorry, it was on the camera, on top of the tripod, but I couldn't get behind the tripod to be above the camera to engage with the subject. I had to have it on the tripod and lean the whole thing back against the wall to then photograph Tom. So I couldn't see the back of the camera, which is another good reason why I was shooting tethered, because it was coming into the laptop. But another thing about it was, again, the technology side of things, because I couldn't go behind the camera, I was having to rely on the camera to do what I would ordinarily do, which is check focus and stuff like that. I'm just thinking, over to you. You do it for me, because I know you can do it. So I'm kind of pressing the shutter like this while the camera is locking onto his face. Wherever Tom's going, it's locking onto his face. In fact, the eye focus, you can, you know, it's locking on. So I am confidently, although it looks a little bit weird doing this, doing the photo shoot, which to Tom must have looked bizarre, because ordinarily you expect somebody to be behind, don't you? But I'm like this. So what was potentially a very difficult situation was made not to be, just by adapting to the environment and handing over the difficult stuff, I guess, to the technology, the camera, and for me to keep engaging. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of weird. It's almost like having, you know, we talk about autonomous cars now, don't we? Driverless cars. It's almost like photo taking-less cameras. People, I mean, I don't know what I'm saying here, but you know what I mean? I don't have to do it.
You're coming up with new ideas.
The camera's literally doing it for me, because I know it does it. I can trust it. And this is a huge thing. And I know we're joking a little bit there, but this is a really serious thing for me, because let's be really honest here. I don't know if I'll ever have the opportunity to go back to do that picture again. And I think you can kind of guess what I'm saying there. So I need to know that I nail it. I need to know I completely nail it. And thankfully I have that confidence for the camera to be able to do that. So I've never been happier with my kit than what I am now. And that's not something that's a bit cliche or I've been asked to say. That is genuinely how I feel about it.
No, it's really good to know. And for those of you that are not aware, obviously, it's going to lead me into my next question. But the Sony system, we have a lot of people, I think, Glyn, think that the A9 sits at the top of the, you know, pyramid of all the cameras we have. What it does, it actually sits in the top of the pillar of speed and autofocus. And the cameras that you're using, the A7R series, is obviously based on, you know, resolution. So the A7R 2 and 3 is 42 million pixels, and the A7R4 that you have is 61 or 60 million. So incredible detail. We have an A7S, which probably some of you are aware, that is the more of the video centric, very extremely low light camera that sits under sensitivity. And then we have the all-rounder, which has an element of everything with similar autofocus to the A9, and that's the A7 III. And I'll come on to some offers in a second. But you've got this, you know, you talked about style, but you know, some of these portraits are obviously sitting, standing, and some of them, not many, but the portraits have this really shallow depth of field. Now, I can only assume, is that maybe something like the G Master, which is the bokeh on that is incredible, or you know, can you still get it with a smaller lens like the 55? How do you go about that? How do you get that shallow depth of field? Because when I'm trying to do my kids at home, I can't get it that, you know, that shallow. I'm doing something wrong, obviously.
I mean, for something like that, maybe the kids aren't the best subject for it, because they're going to be moving around a lot. And actually, that's a good point to make, because, you know, if anybody's looked at the series of portraits, they'll notice that not every veteran has got a close-up portrait taken. Do you know what I mean? It's not everybody's got that. There are some of them. Let me just show you an example of them, actually, so you can see what Mark's on about there. This is a guy called Frank Pendergast. And I don't know, hopefully that's shown up quite clearly, but you can see that the eyes are absolutely pin sharp. and then it's kind of dropping out literally from the bottom of his eyebrow. It's then dropping out of focus and what have you. Now, the way I do that, it is using that Sony G Master, this one here, which is the 85mm, the 1.4, and those portraits are shot at around about f1.8, maybe f2, something like that. So it is an incredibly shallow depth of field. Now, although the cameras can lock on, you know, using the eye focus, and that works brilliantly. And I think earlier this week there was a video I'd put together which showed that on people and on animals. But for this one here, what I tend to do is I'll have the camera on a tripod, which is really important. And then I'll use manual focus, because then I can take advantage of the focus peaking, which is so important, and so, oh my God, it's a lifesaver. It really is a lifesaver. So I can very nice and calmly sit there. I can wind that focus ring manually, and on the back of my screen, anywhere that's nice and sharp and in focus kind of flickers, and I've got this like yellow kind of flickering going on. And the minute I see that on their eye, because the minute you go into manual and turn it, it zooms in. You put the eye right in the middle of the screen there, turn the dial, and it goes like all these yellow bits. I know then it's sharp, and then you take the shot, and it's just like, wow. To be able to do that, because I tried to do it just by using normal kind of, you know, autofocus and stuff like that, but because it's such a shallow depth of field, and I'm shooting 1.8, I sometimes had the eyelash sharp, and the eye would be out of focus. So having this kind of focus peaking really allows you to dial it in, and it's just, but you don't do it with everybody, because sometimes people are moving, or maybe their condition, if we're talking about a veteran, they struggle to keep perfectly still. So that's one of the reasons I don't do it. And also sometimes it just doesn't feel appropriate on the first visit to do that headshot. You know, you kind of, if you can do, I'll save that for another visit, rather than me going in thinking I must get a seated or standing and a headshot. You've got to kind of adapt. Again, we've talked about that earlier on. You've got to adapt to who you're with.
We don't have any more questions at the moment, but Owen's just brought this up. Mark and Glyn are loving your involvement. We certainly are. So please keep asking those questions. Please keep bringing them in. One thing I haven't mentioned is where you mentioned a couple of lenses there, Glyn. We have a system, one mount system, which means you don't need any adapters for the E-mount system, that is. And that includes our APS-C range, the full frame range, and the ProCam range. So you can use all the same lenses. There's 57 native lenses in the system, and you can use obviously all those in, you know, without any adapters. So you're getting the native autofocus as well as your manual focus as well. And again, with the focus peaking, it isn't just yellow. You can have different colors, and I think on the A7R4 they've added some other colors as well. I think blue, because obviously you've got a red background on red. You know, you can use all those different colors. So it's mainly a video piece of technology that now is used for that fine tuning. So really good. I've seen a lot of macro activity webinars on the Cambridge Photography Week webinars this week, so it would be ideal for, you know, getting that real fine tuning as well. So again, please get your questions in. We will be wrapping up soon. Would you believe it? We've now been nearly talking for 50 minutes.
No way.
Yeah,
you said 15 minutes.
50. Yeah, we said half an hour, but it's been great because all the questions that are coming in, and it's, you know, it's so important to see you know, how you've gone about this, but the importance of, you know, yes, technology, but how you engage with the person you're taking the photograph with, the people around that person as well. It's vitally important, not just from the what it's going to look like at the end. Am I going to keep, you know, are they going to recognize this person for what they see? But from the start, and I think that's so powerful. It really is. And you know,
actually, on that note, Mark, I've got a picture here I can show, which is actually
sure,
from the exhibition that we had, and it's this guy here. Let me just show you this. This is a guy called Albert Allen, Albie, who didn't want to be photographed. I mean, he's a lovely character, real character. I had a lot of fun with him. But I thought it was really powerful when he was at the exhibition and he stood next to his own portrait. I loved that. It just seemed to really, I don't know, just the look on his face. It was almost like he was kind of like saying either he was proud of the person he was looking at, or was it me, or whatever. I don't know. But to be able to do that for the veterans was great. But you can see there the detail was just, it was almost like there was two Alberts. You know what I mean? It was just wonderful.
No, it's very very powerful. So for those of you again that aren't aware of Glyn's website, there it is, www.glyndewis.com, and also the 3945 project. So I'll bring that up a second. Let's just make sure I bring that up. There we go. Is www.3945portraits.com. So please visit those if you want to find out more information about Glyn and his work. And like I said, on his website there are a huge amount, on your YouTube channel as well actually. I think your social channels are coming up here, so let's just remove those. There we go. So at Glyn Dewis, I think that's Instagram, YouTube,
everything,
pretty much everything.
Keep it simple.
And obviously if there are any questions that you haven't managed to ask today, then fire them at Glyn, and he'll be more than happy to pick them up. And if there are other questions that you want to push through Campkins, through the Cambridge Photography Week, then please do, and we just ask Owen and his team to forward them to us at a later stage if you don't have the time to answer these right now. Glyn, it's been an absolute pleasure. Before you go, there's a couple of things I just want to share with the Campkins audience. You might have seen yesterday that we have a UK and Ireland nationwide cashback campaign. It's on selected items. So if you are looking at, for example, an A7 Mark III that Owen's picked up on the comments, I think that's roughly around £1,750, £1,800. I think it's £200 cashback on that. And on top of that, we also have a lens scheme. So if you haven't already, or you will do when you purchase your product, register your camera or your camera body with this website here. It's www.sony.co.uk/mysony, and then you can be entitled to another £100 off your next lens purchase. So don't put it into cashback yet. Register your product, and you may get even more money off. And if that's not good enough, then all this week Campkins are offering 10% off, so you'll save 10% off those prices as well. So it's an incredible time to buy, it really is, with Black Friday around the corner as well. And if you've seen some of the Black Friday deals, you might actually see that some of these this week with the Sony kit are better, so you might want to buy through Campkins this week. For those of you that aren't aware, we also have a free grip. My goodness, I've never talked about so many offers in my career on these webinars. A free grip worth £170 if you're looking at the ZV-1, the vlogging camera. Fantastic camera. And if you want to find more out about the vlogging camera as well, then I have a little video that we've put together for Campkins for Cambridge Photography Week, which is on Sunday at 12 PM, the 22nd. That will give you a good idea about this camera. So save 10% off that, £69, and you get a free grip, which is absolutely incredible. Glyn, we don't have any more questions. Cliff Harvey says, very well done and informative as usual, Glyn. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Cliff.
Absolutely. Can't say much more than that. Thank you for that. Again, is there anything you want to add before we kind of sign off?
I don't know, really. I just sort of say that, well, yeah, there is actually. When it comes to taking your portraits, spend more time, 80% of your time talking, 20% of the time taking the pictures, and you will get the kind of pictures that we ultimately want as portrait photographers. It's all right. It's all well and good saying, oh, that's a nice picture, it's well composed and all that kind of stuff, and it's nice and sharp. Obviously, that's important. But when it comes to actually the final product, when you give that to the person, or maybe somebody who knows the person that you photographed sees it, when they look at it and go, that is so them, that you've got them down to a T, that is fun. Oh, yeah, that is so them. That is ultimately what we're after. It's all well and good having a great picture that's just nice. Ultimately, we want that and somebody saying that is so them. And you're only going to get that when you spend time talking to them.
Inspiring. Thank you, Glyn. And just one final comment there. Alex Davis says, excellent session. Thank you. So again, thank you, Glyn. We're going to fade out now with some footage to kind of just sum up the emotion and the feeling of the content that Glyn has photographed, and how important it is to us not to forget and remember those loved ones around us that obviously fought in previous wars, and still with us or not with us today. So thank you for your time. Thank you to Owen and his team all week. Have done a superb job putting all the content out. So thank you, Owen. And just one more video on Sunday for me. If you could put that one up, that would be fantastic. But thank you for all your support, and have a great weekend. And we'll just finish on this very, very short video before we go. So thank you ever so much, and have a great great weekend. Thank you, Glyn. All the best.
Cheerio.
Khaki-clad, we lie in wait, close by the embattled Norman shore. Each man conscious of his fate to weave a tapestry of war in Normandy. Soon the evil roar of 1,000 guns defiles the summer sky, as fate decides which of its sons will be the next to die in Normandy. Brave citizens of France with loyal hearts face the hell of conflict loosened from its chain, as steadfast families play their lonely part, suffer death or misery or pain in Normandy. No red-coat tale of glory here we tell, where every yard of bocage takes its toll. The thrill of action soon loses all its spell, and war seals horror in our soul in Normandy. Then fear takes second place to pride. The tired and mighty armies pause before we all move up for the next assault in the noble fight for peace and freedom scored in Normandy.